Yep, I think it is. Hi, I'm Darren Wright from 12 Church, and this is my old axe that I used to use cutting survey lines. It is an outstanding old ox head axe. Listen to this. Don't find steel like that on axes anymore. I cut a lot of survey lines with this and made a lot of money even with this axe. Thousands, tens of thousands of dollars made with this axe while I was line cutting. In my early years of ministry, I realized that if this pastor thing didn't work out, I could always go back line cutting. I was a full-time vocational pastor, but felt like I had a parachute out. Now, this age and stage, line cutting would be pretty tough. Don't know if my forearms could handle it. However, I've been bivocational now for over a decade. And during that time, I've had to do things to supplement my income. I've done professional speaking, I've done online marketing, I've worked in different forms, different ways, and that was following 18 and a half years as a regular pastor. Recently, I've been getting queries from individuals wondering about the realities of bivocational ministry. Sometimes they're pastors looking to make a shift, realizing they need to do things differently. In some cases, they're being forced into a more bivocational role due to financial realities or ministry realities in the church they're a part of. Some people who are lay people want to move into ministry, but not full-time vocational ministry. If you are in any way considering or wanting to understand bivocational ministry, I've got 7 considerations for you. 3 are external and 4 are personal. The first external consideration has to do with the inefficiency and ineffectiveness of the average church in making disciples. From time to time, I will find the annual report of a church online, take their total budget, divide it by the number of baptisms, and see what that figure is. It's very common for it to be around $50,000 to $60,000 per baptism. The most recent church I did, the figure came out to $185,000. This was a fairly large church, a budget of close to $2 million. They had about 10 baptisms, hence a cost of $185,000 per baptism. If it costs us $185,000 to make a disciple, we're not going to reach the world. In fact, we're probably not even going to reach our neighbors. Something radical needs to change. And it might not be that it's all about bivocational ministry, but bivocational ministry might be a part of the answer, especially when it's paired with a different way of doing church. The second external consideration is that the institutional church has been discredited, and all churches are lumped together. When an individual church or Christian comes out spewing hate in some form, or historical wrongs are uncovered, or there's sexual immorality, all churches are painted with the same brush. But when you're in bivocational ministry, you don't look like your regular pastor. Your church doesn't look like a regular church. And even in the minds of the unchurched, you're in a little bit different category. The third consideration is somewhat related, and that has to do with the increasingly hostile culture. The cultural flow in the Western world, for sure, is opposed to Christianity. Christianity was once front and center. It has been pushed to the side and is increasingly being marginalized. If you see what happened in Europe, you see it happening in Canada, and you see it even happening in the United States. Big churches and big denominations make big targets. Big targets for protests, for disruptions, for lawsuits. When you are in a bivocational role, again, especially in an alternative kind of church like my wife and I are involved in, you're completely under the radar. Much more subversive, much more like salt and light and perfume. In many ways, you're seen as a completely different thing, even by those in the church and outside the church. Here are 4 personal considerations. The first personal consideration: are you sold out on being a disciple who makes disciples? Are you all in on mission with Jesus? Now, whether you're in bivocational ministry or not, you should be if you're a disciple. But if you're not, don't go into bivocational ministry or even vocational ministry. There's too many doing it for the wrong reasons. A second personal consideration is, are you gifted? Are you wired in such a way that bivocational ministry will work? Do you have some teaching ability, some leadership skills, some organizational skills, some evangelistic skills? Are you somewhat organized? Do you have this capacity to be a self-starter when there's no one looking over your shoulder? Those things are all rather essential when it comes to bivocational ministry. A third personal consideration is your family on board? When you're in any kind of ministry, when you're a Christian, it affects your whole family. When you're a pastor, a full-time vocational pastor or minister, it affects your whole family. But when you're in a bivocational role, it really tends to move the entire family more to the front line. So if you're married, your spouse needs to be all in as well. If you have children, they need to understand what you're doing and why. My first year of Bible college, there was a fellow who was there training to be a missionary overseas. But we discovered in that first semester that his wife, who lived 1,000 miles away, was not yet a believer. And yet here he was training to go overseas to be a missionary. It didn't fit. Bivocational ministry is about an integrated way of living that affects your whole family. Is your family on board? One more big personal consideration, but first, here's a question. What is your biggest question about bivocational ministry? Please consider leaving a comment with your question. The fourth personal consideration for bivocational ministry is this. Are you prepared for the financial reality? The truth is, many pastors, I would say in a lot of cases, most pastors who are in full-time vocational roles are fairly well paid, have good benefits. It's relatively stable. As stable as a lot of jobs. When you go into a bivocational role, you kiss a lot of those props goodbye. I did a number crunch a while ago about the difference it's made with us being bivocational for the last decade. The difference was well into 6 figures, which is fine, but you've got to be prepared for it. And so going into bivocational ministry requires either some savings or some support or some skills that allow you to make money, or maybe moving to a more simple lifestyle that actually costs you less to live. In his book Bivo, Hugh Halter talks about smart jobs. Jobs that by their nature put you in contact with the people who you're seeking to reach, or jobs that allow you to make a lot of money in a short period of time, freeing up the rest of your time for ministry. In my bivocational years, I've done professional speaking, online marketing, developed a lot of skills along the way that make it possible for me to earn money outside of the ministry to support the ministry. I highly recommend you get a copy of Bivo if you're looking into bivocational ministry. There's a link in the description. Bivocational ministry is not the answer to every challenge the church faces. But bivocational ministry paired with a different way of doing church, I believe will make us more effective and more efficient in making disciples. If you want to talk about bivocational ministry and the on-the-ground reality of it, feel free to hunt me down and contact me via 12 Church. And be sure to grab Hugh's book if you're half seriously looking into this kind of ministry. And while it may not be time for every vocational pastor or layperson to go into bivocational ministry, it may be time for you.